Well, I mean, there's different hats that I wear, and I'll answer the question based upon what hat I'm wearing. If a client came in to see me and they said, listen, I want to start a business, what should I do? As an attorney, I would say, look, here's the liability issues. Here's the deal. You're going to be dealing maybe with a partner or maybe with an associate. You guys are going to have, or you two girls or whoever's doing it, you're going to have all sorts of relationships between y'all. You're going to have issues that need to be profit splitting. The attorney in me would say, yes, you need to set something up immediately before you begin business. Now, a lot of people start business in real estate or start business on the internet and do all different sorts of businesses, and they're not really sure if it's something they want to do. So the pragmatic person would say, well, you know what, maybe I'll just wait till I start making money, then I'll set everything up. Well, that's not necessarily a horrible way to go, but the problem is that what most people do is they end up waiting years and years, and they just get busy with their business, and they don't do anything. And so they end up getting relationships together with other parties who want to be involved in the business, and they have no agreements. They have no idea how to split profits. And then it ends up snowballing to where they've been in business, 3-4 years. They've already now paid, thousands and thousands of dollars in extra taxes. They're not structured correctly. So there is a point, and for each person, it's going to be unique. But it's kind of like this. It's kind of like the analogy of driving without insurance. You could drive your car without insurance for 2 years and maybe never get in an accident, and then there could be somebody that just pulls out of the driveway and they just smack somebody. So you really can't say, but I can tell you that the person who in the first year of business expects to make some money, at least more than a couple $1,000s, they probably are going to be much better off having an entity that's properly structured so they can take advantage of some of the tax savings that will come from splitting income between some of the different tax brackets as you can with a properly structured business entity. So if you're really small and you're making $25,000 a year, you're going to be throwing away a couple $1,000s a year just because you're being taxed in a manner that's going to make all of your profits from the business subject to what we call self-employment taxes, and we can get into that more. But even for the small business, that extra couple $1,000s a year that you're paying to Uncle Sam, really isn't in the best interest of probably where you want to go. Because you can take that money and you can put it into some other activities, marketing, promotion, and everything else.
Oh, yeah, completely. Now that everybody knows that they need a protective entity and they should start it right away, what are the different entities available, and when might the LLC make sense over a corporation, like an S Corp or a C Corp?
Well, here's the interesting thing about it. The LLC is a tremendously flexible vehicle. An LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. It tends to be the most popular entity for small business owners these days, also for Internet businesses. One of the reasons why it's very popular and very good is that it has tremendous tax choices. So really these days, we don't exactly think about entities in terms of, well, do I choose a C corporation? Do I choose what's called an S corporation? Do I choose an LLC? What you can do these days is you can choose the tax treatment that you would like for your LLC. So you can start with an LLC, and then you can choose the type of tax treatment. So I guess I'll qualify that question by saying, by responding and saying, well, the question really is, what type of tax treatment makes the most sense? And generally for most small business owners, an LLC that is taxed under what's called Subchapter S makes the most sense. And a lot of people have heard of a Subchapter S corporation. The LLC tax under Subchapter S is very similar. And what that S designation means, we say S corporation, Subchapter S LLC. All that really refers to is a section in the IRS code that allows for a certain manner of splitting up earnings in the company. So a corporation could choose that, an LLC could choose that. But because the LLCs are so flexible and don't require as much formality as corporations, usually if you're going to use this S election, this Subchapter S choice, there's usually some great advantages to using an LLC for that Subchapter S choice. And if you have time, I'd like to get into some of the reasons why that Subchapter S election is pretty important.
Well, and that's actually one of the things I contacted you recently on, was because my CPA was talking about that and said to talk to a lawyer about if my LLC's put together correctly so I can figure out if I need to do this Subchapter S. Yeah, if you could tell us a little bit more about that, that'd be great, especially for me.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Well, the Subchapter S is, like I said, it's a section out of the Internal Revenue Code, the IRS code, and that's where you have all your IRS tax rules are in the Internal Revenue Code. And what it allows for is it allows for a certain type of tax treatment that's very beneficial for avoiding what we call self-employment taxes. Here's an interesting story, and I'm sure everybody can relate to this. You may remember, if anybody, let's say, is a wage earner these days, and you had started, let's say, your first job. I remember I was 16 and I was sacking groceries. And I remember I was getting paid something like $3.50 an hour. Let's just say it was $4 an hour. And it probably wasn't that much, but let's say it was $4 for the sake of keeping things rounded. $4 an hour, and I had worked, let's say, 10 hours. And I thought, well, I should get a check for $40. 4 times 10, 40. So you may plan out what you're going to spend that money for, what you're going to spend that money on. Well, basically what would happen, though, is that there was always a certain amount taken out. There was this about 7.5% taken out, okay? And you would always say, well, God, why isn't it that I got, the $40 that I was going to get? I worked 10 hours, I was paid $4 an hour. Why didn't I get the $40? Well, that's because there's something called FICA, and those are self-employment taxes. And half of that money comes out of your paycheck as an employee. You pay that, okay? The other half of that is paid by your employer. So at the time, I was working at Safeway many, many years ago, sacking groceries as a young kid. Well, Safeway paid that 7.5%. It's actually 7.65, and then I had to and then that 7.65 was taken out of my paycheck. I was going to say I had to take it out, but I didn't voluntarily take it out. They took it out for me. So I lost 7.65% basically of the money that I had made. Now, that does go into Social Security, retirement, and all that thing, but at this point, for most of us that are pretty young, I think that's, without making a political commentary here, that's kind of a risky proposition to think that, you're going to see that money again. You may, you may not. For most business owners, the idea is to minimize those self-employment taxes. But here's the biggest problem. Guess what happens when you own your own business? Okay? Now remember, when I was at Safeway, they took out 7.65% from my paycheck, and Safeway took out and paid. Actually, they contributed 7.65%. Well, now that I own my own business, if I'm not structured correctly, the 15.3% that represents the total of those two 7.65%, that's going to be paid by me. Why? Because I am the employer and the employee. In this case, I'm Safeway and I am the sacker because I own my own business. And in that event, I would pay the 15.3% off of my taxable income. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one of the huge advantages of Subchapter F is that you can split income that is earned in the company and split it between salary income and what are called dividends or small business distributions. And when you split it that way, you're able to save a great deal of money on the self-employment taxes. So for most smaller businesses that are earning less than 80, well, actually, if your business is earning somewhere between, $100 to probably around $170,000, that self-employment tax is going to be a big issue. So for most internet entrepreneurs that are starting out, those are some immediate tax savings right outside the gate. And an LLC can choose to be taxed under that Subchapter F, okay? And that is why it's a tremendous advantage. Now, you could choose a corporation taxed under Subchapter F, but corporations require a lot more formality. They require meetings every year.